I'm very thrilled to speak to my guest today, guitarist and lutenist Nicola Pignatiello. He teaches at the Liceo Giordano Bruno in Rome and also at CESMI. This is the episode that all my guitarist audience members have been waiting for, and we will be deep diving into Partimento on the guitar. Nicola has recorded some really beautiful Partimento realizations on the guitar that have received very positive responses from the Partimento community, and we will further talk about Partimento on the guitar. Nicola, welcome to the Nikhil Hogan Show.
Hi, Nikhil, and thank you for inviting me.
Can I ask you a little bit about your background first? When did you start music, and when did you start the guitar?
Yeah, I started music when I was a little kid in my village. I came from a really tiny village in south of Italy, Lacedonia. It's about 2,000 people. And in Lacedonia, there is a lot of music, like, I don't know the English, we say like band. It's like wind orchestras playing in mass, funeral, and religious parties.
Okay.
I started with the trumpet. And then after 2-3 years, I found a guitar teacher because I liked much more the guitar. So I started to play the guitar like at 10 years old, like privately in my village. And then I started the Conservatory when I was 15.
Were you learning classical guitar from the beginning?
No, I grew up with a mixed program, let's say, with the classical. I remember some studies of Giuliani, Carulli, like the 120 arpeggios of Giuliani on classical guitar, but also a lot of blues and rock music.
Oh, so you were exposed to Giuliani from a very young age then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, was one of the first things I played on the guitar.
And so tell me, what happened at the Conservatory when you started at 15? Were you doing a pretty traditional classical guitar education? So it means typically a lot of repertoire and that sort of thing?
Yes, in the Conservatorium, I had a totally classical guitar program, and I was really into it. So I was studying a lot of repertoire and also a lot of technique, of course, in different styles, from Bach to contemporary music, passing through romantic and classical age. And I remember I just stopped to play solos, and I became a really good sight reader, reading the music of other people, but not anymore making solos like I was used to in blues and rock.
So you used to improvise blues and rock before?
Yes. That's mainly what I did when I was playing also the electric guitar.
That's very interesting because you have both the contemporary side and the classical side at the same time. Can I just ask, in Italy, because in Singapore, when they take classical guitar lessons, it's mainly for a music exam, and then they play repertoire, and then they do the test, and then that's it. And there's really no improvisation, there's no composition. But what was it like in your village? Was it like that, or was there a bit more variety? Were people who were taking guitar lessons there also learning different styles?
In my village, when you have a little village, you just have like 1 or 2 teachers. So all the program is about what is the musical taste of this teacher. And this in particular, that was my teacher. Also, his name is Nicola. He was really into blues and rock and also some bossa nova. So we used to let's say, make a lot of chamber music, but not chamber music like in the classical point of view, but like playing together as a band.
And so were you doing 10 years of conservatory training?
Yeah, the program was the old program of 10 years, but I was so into it that I finished like in 7.
Wow, impressive.
And I was spending all my time studying and practicing.
And so what was your direction? Did you see yourself as a concert guitar player?
Yeah, totally. In fact, after graduating in Italy, I wanted to go on in Maastricht in Holland, where I found Carlo Marchione, that is one of the best guitarists I ever met. And he's also a very good teacher. And the point of the master was just to become a concert player. And that's what I did not so many years, let's say. I'm not that old. Let's say in the last 10 years, I played many concerts as a classical guitar player.
Now, when did you discover Partimento, and when did that start to be something that you were interested in?
I heard the first time the word Partimento in a private class with Enrico Baiano. The Conservatory of Maastricht had a nice program that for the master students, they just paid some private class. You could choose any teacher out of the school and they will pay the private class. So with my friend Daniele, that we were playing in duo Scarlatti, a lot of Scarlatti, we were in love with the recordings of Enrico Baiano. So we took a flight to Naples and went to have a lesson with Baiano. That is an incredible player and an incredible teacher at the same time.
What made you decide to take, because he's a harpsichordist, right? So you're a guitarist. Why did you decide to take lessons from a harpsichordist?
Because we were working a lot on Scarlatti and Bach, so a lot of harpsichord repertoire. And we wanted to have lesson with somebody who really spent most of his life playing that repertoire. Because, on the guitar, you play maybe too much repertoire. You never focused for so much like a cembalo player on Scarlatti on Bach. You can do for a few years, but not for 30 years. And we were really in love with Baiano made some incredible recordings of Scarlatti sonatas, and we wanted to listen his point of view on that music.
Just really quickly, is there any particular recording you can recommend that were really nice? Any particular pieces?
He recorded a full CD of Scarlatti sonatas. So we found first on YouTube because the CD was sold out and we couldn't find anywhere the CD. So somebody put this CD on YouTube. And also Baiano told us that he was happy about this because so some people can hear the music. I cannot remember the label, but I can find. So
tell me about those lessons. What happened at the lessons?
Well, during the lesson, I remember we were playing mostly Concerto Italiano by Bach. That as the second tempo of the concerto is an andante with an accompaniment and a kind of improvisation in the melody, but it's all written out by Bach. And I remember Baiano told us that at the time they were used to improvise ornaments, but also there was a full academic program about improvisation that was called Partimento. And he told us this word, and it stuck into my mind for a quite long time.
Well, what year was this when you discovered Partimento?
It was like 2005, or
wow.
Maybe 2006.
Okay, wow. That's a long time ago. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if the book of Sanguinetti was already out in that year.
I believe that was published in 2012.
Okay. So, yeah, before the book, because of course, also Professor Sanguinetti spent a lot of time studying and talking about this in a conference, writing articles. So in that years, all the topic of Partimento was known just by a few people. I heard that word for the first time from Baiano, and I remember that when I was speaking with other colleagues about this topic, nobody knew what we were talking about.
And that's in Italy, right? That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
That's astonishing. Okay, so how did that continue to grow then? Because as I think historically, Partimento is a keyboard activity. What made you think about Partimento on the guitar?
When I told you I was playing blues and rock when I was a teenager, I remember that when I was jamming with other colleagues in the Conservatorium, I was pretty good in improvising on the pentatonic scale. I could improvise a solo in the blues, and I felt really bad that I could not improvise anything in classical style. And I always felt this like a shame, I can say. Yes. When I heard Partimento from Enrico Baiano, and then I started looking for some articles, then finally I got the book of Sanguinetti. I found that there was a program, there was a way to learn how to improvise also in a classical style that was not just a legend, that you don't need to be a genius to do it. When I was in the Conservatory, somebody told me the story that Bach could improvise a fugue, and for me was, the only response to this legend was, of course, Bach can do it, but a normal human being cannot do this thing. Then a few years ago, there was a conference about improvisation and partimenti in Tor Vergata that was organized by Sanguinetti, and there was an incredible organ and cembalo player there holding this lesson, and he just improvised a fugue in front of all of us. It was a Partimento fugue, and I was really shocked. I say, oh wow! So that you don't have to be Bach to do these kind of things.
So 2005 to 2012, were you starting to look for articles and try to find your own way on the guitar with Partimento?
I was trying to find a way to improvise in Baroque music, because Carlo Marchione, that was the guitar teacher in Maastricht, he worked a lot on Baroque music. So for 2 years we were playing mostly Baroque music, and I was really into this topic of improvisation and ornamentation. And so in fact, my final thesis was improvising on Bach. I made some improvisation on the Italian concerto after reading, original sources and articles and listen to recordings, trying to figure out how to do it on the guitar. And yes, that was mostly about Baroque music. Then after, when I became a teacher, I wanted to try on the students some lessons about improvisations, and I found that it was super fun for me and also for the students, and super interesting about pedagogy. I felt that was something really, really good to do, and also that I needed, as a teacher and as a musician, to promote this kind of program, because we are now in 2021, and we play mostly classical music. So in the life of a guitar player, there is a lot of music that is very far from us in the time. When you propose this kind of music to kids that normally can listen to hip hop, rock, and they have Instagram, Facebook, they live in a totally different world from Giuliani and Carulli, they feel this music like being really, really old, like out of their
Yeah, when people
life.
say old, they think like 2 years ago, but we're talking really old. We're talking a couple of 100 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel that the students can feel this music out of their reality. So it's like, I don't know, your grandpa telling stories of the war. I say, oh, come on. So I felt that when they start to learn some little things about improvisation, they can start writing some little pieces. This time gap just disappear. They start to think this music just like music.
Okay, so I want to ask you a little bit about the history of the guitar and Partimento. When did the guitar, the 6-string classical guitar, was that around in the 18th century, in the 17th century? Were people playing 6-string guitars at that time?
The guitar had 6-string like at the end of 18th century. The problem with the guitar is that is an instrument that changed a lot during time. The first guitar was like a Renaissance 4-string guitar. Then we had the 5-string with double courses, like a lute, that we usually call Baroque guitar. Then we have some intermediate instruments, like we had a 6-string guitar but with double courses. And then finally we arrived like at the end of 18th century to a 6-string guitar with single courses.
Sorry, Nicola, what's a course? What do you mean by that?
String.
Oh, I see. Okay, so, but you said double courses. What does double courses mean?
Double strings, like cori.
So there's 2 strings per
Yes, that sometimes are at the same tone.
Right.
Sometimes they are at octave.
So like for contemporary music, that's like a 12-string guitar.
Yes,
Kind
let's
of.
say, yeah, a kind of.
Okay. And wow, that's pretty late then. At the end of the 18th century. And what do you mean, like 1780, 1790, something like that?
I think should be about 1750 or 60. Like to have the first guitars. We found also some, they used to have an old guitar that was a Baroque guitar, and they brought to a luthier to change the shape of the guitar and to have 6 strings instead of 5. And we have the same with lutes too. So we have some instruments that were originally in one shape, and then they were modified in another shape.
So when we talk about the classical guitar, there are a few names that come up. And I think one of the most famous ones is Fernando Sor, and he was born 1778. And Mauro Giuliani, 1781. Fernando Carulli. Would you consider them, their style, kind of the 18th century Italian Neapolitan tradition?
The guitar, let's say, is not the center of the history of music in this time. And like all the side projects, let's say, it was not really on time with the history of music. So the style of Sor, Giuliani, Carulli is not the same as we could say like Beethoven. Beethoven was born exactly the same year of Carulli. So the guitar was a bit late in style, in front of the piano, violin, or orchestra. Also because a matter of the development of instruments. Because the guitar changed a lot. So, for example, a piano player came from a big tradition of fortepiano and cembalo and organ players, where they mostly have the same, or let's say a very, very similar technique. But on the guitar, you don't have this kind of thing because the guitar was totally different 100 years before. So they didn't have a real tradition of playing that instrument because the instrument was so different.
When we talk about the Baroque, people did play these, they're not so similar to the guitar. For instance, the lute, the theorbo. Is there anything that's similar when you play the lute and then you play the guitar? Because I know you also play the lute.
They didn't used to play so many instruments like us. Today, early plucked music player normally plays like 5-6 instruments. You play Baroque guitar, Renaissance guitar, Renaissance lute, theorbo, vihuela. They were not used to so many instruments. Normally they were playing like lute and theorbo or lute and Baroque guitar. But Baroque guitar is very, very different in making music from the classical guitar. So we say guitar, but it's a very different instrument. And we can say maybe the lute is more similar to the guitar than the Baroque guitar to what we call the classical guitar today, because the Baroque guitar didn't have the basses, and that's very important to know because if we think about how they were playing music, they didn't have not even the 6th string, but also the 5th string. What we have today, the low A, was normally with the octave higher, so it was just like the A on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string.
Oh, that's weird. So like basically when you expect lower strings, it actually goes higher then.
Yes, that's why
it's like a ukulele.
A kind of a more refined ukulele, but it didn't allow you to have basses, so it was not a good instrument to play like on the lute. That when you have a bass that accompany a melody up, but with the Baroque guitar is all strumming and arpeggios. It's much more a melodic instrument than a polyphonic one.
Were people realizing basso continuo on these instruments like the Baroque guitar and the lute? Were they looking at figures and were they realizing strumming in the early 17th and in the 17th and the 18th century?
Yes, totally. And we have also methods for realizing basso continuo on the lute, on the theorbo, and also on the Baroque guitar. There was Nicola that wrote also a book about, was famous because his way to realize basso continuo on the guitar was comparable to a cembalo player. He was very famous for this. We can remember that François Campion, that was a theorbo player and lute player, he claimed to be the inventor of the rule of the octave. He was playing in the orchestra in the Opera of Paris, and he said that he had this rule that his teacher told him to accompany in every situation with guitar or lute or whatever. So yes, totally they were realizing basso continuo.
Why did you pick as models Giuliani and Carulli? What sets them apart from the other, I guess, guitarists of that era?
Because they were Neapolitan. Carulli was from Naples. Giuliani not, but he studied with a Neapolitan teacher. And so they were grown up in this Neapolitan, let's say, music world. And when I started to look for guitar and partimenti, I remember for a couple of years I was really frustrated because I couldn't find any proof that guitar was realizing partimenti. I couldn't find any book about guitar and partimenti, not even one line of a manuscript for guitar and partimenti. So I was really frustrated, and at some point I had an idea. I decided if I cannot find any proof that somebody was realizing partimenti on the guitar, I can assume that if you were born in Naples and you were studying music, this was the common musical language. So let's say you could also not study partimenti like a cembalo player, like you could not play Fenaroli, Durante, and make all the exercises. But anyway, you were into this musical world. So I wanted to find if there were traces of this kind of style in their music. And in this way, I found many traces of this style in their music. And so suddenly my frustration went away.
If we talk about the Neapolitan method, there's 3 years of singing solfeggi. I think they wrote solfeggi, right? And they sold solfeggi. Is that right?
Ferdinando Carulli, when he moved to Paris, he had most of his musical life in Paris. He published many books of guitar and also one of solfeggi with accompaniment of guitar.
If we could talk a little bit about Giuliani himself, what is interesting about his style that you saw that was, because you said you were looking, right, for traces. So what did you find in Giuliani?
First I want to say that Giuliani, he was living in Puglia, in Bisceglie, is one of the southern part of Italy, and suddenly came a cello player from Naples, Gaetano Lucci, that married the sister of Giuliani, Mauro, and he also had a brother, Nicola Giuliani. And we know that this cello player taught music to Giuliani and the brother. I was looking everywhere about the life of this cello player, but I couldn't find any new about him. But we know that also the cello players in Naples were studying and realizing partimenti and numbers on the bass. This we know from a student of Rotterdam Folk School wrote a beautiful thesis about the cello in Naples in that year. So we know that they were studying these kind of things. And Giuliani moved first in Trieste, then to Vienna, where he had the most of his musical career. And he published a lot of studies for guitar students because guitar was in a really good moment. So we know that from the publisher, Giuliani made more money selling the 120 arpeggios for guitar than Beethoven for some of his sonatas.
Really?
That's ridiculous. Yes, but it's the market, you know.
That's incredible. So you're saying he outsold Beethoven?
Yes, totally.
Wow.
Yeah, it's the market. So he published a lot for students. And what I found but also a lot of concert music. He wrote the first concerto for guitar orchestra. he really did a lot of incredible stuff. And what I found is that in Giuliani, we have a lot of studies that just look like counterpoint exercises. They're really close to if you know the Lavinia manuscript. There are mostly two voices, many times on a bass that is just a scale. And I have something here because I found that especially in Opus 51 and Opus 50, I can play something on the guitar.
Okay.
They have Opus 51 is just two voice counterpoint. And so on. Number 2 has the bass that is just a scale. Do, re, mi, fa, mi, re. And then sol, la, si, do, re, re with compound cadence. And most of the studies are made in this style. And I think it cannot be just a case. It's really the same language we find on the counterpoint manuscript. So I found this in Giuliani, but also many galant schemata. They have a lot. I found that Giuliani really liked the major. He used a lot the major, but also the do re mi, and many preeners. This is a sonatina from the Opus 71. So do re mi. It's a rondo that starts with do re mi. So it's really their musical language is this one.
Does counterpoint flow easily on the guitar? So is it a struggle to find these notes? Because on the keyboard, it's quite straightforward, right? But on the guitar, does it feel natural or does it feel like a finger twister?
No, this kind of music is really natural on the guitar because it was written by a great guitarist. But when you try to make your own exercise in counterpoint the guitar, you can get crazy.
So you're actually saying it does flow quite nicely then on the guitar?
Yeah, but I have a kind of example. If you have something like the bass that goes up by step, you normally use the 5/6 5/6, no? So a normal realization would be etc. In this year of pandemic, I studied a lot because I really had nothing to do with concerts. They were all canceled. So I was studying the Lavinia manuscript, and there are some realizations of this movement, of this typical movement. If we compare the Lavinia solutions, are really much more difficult on the guitar and much less effective than the Giuliani one. For example, in Lavinia we have mi, sol, la, si, mi, do, fa. While in Giuliani we have something that is much more guitaristic. It sounds much better on the guitar and it's much easier to play because it's like also a kind of schema for the fingers on the fretboard.
So when you mean guitaristic, like for instance, the rule of the octave on the keyboard, no problem, right? Just whatever you want. Just change the key, the fingers move a little bit. But on the guitar, not so straightforward. Do you find the rule of the octave is, do you have to compensate sometimes when you're doing something like the rule of the octave?
Yes. You have to compensate the number of voices, but also the octave of the bass. There is something very nice that I made a research about the rule of the octave on the guitar. And I found that when the guitar had only 5 strings, they made the bass just going up, like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do. So this is Doisy, that was a French guitar player that wrote this rule on the octave on this method. Here put a 6, and it's full of octaves because you cannot avoid this on the 5-chord guitar. But when the guitar got the 6th string, Ferdinando Carulli also wrote his rule of the octave. We have the bass that goes do, re, mi, and then 1 octave down. So they were really used to compensate, because on the guitar is the only way you can do it.
Okay, so what you're saying is it's not always going to be straightforward up and down. Sometimes you might have to jump, right? An octave.
Yeah, normally you have to jump.
Ah, okay, very interesting. If somebody wants to attempt Partimento on the guitar, let's start at the beginning. Now, I've read that you've mentioned that we have to adapt from the keyboard, because obviously the Partimento was designed for the keyboard. How should somebody start if they have a guitar, and what should they do first?
I think a really good way to start is Fenaroli, also for the guitarist, because it's super, let's say, didactical. It's so well structured, as a number of lessons. But it's important to don't just read the Fenaroli and try to realize. But first, look in the example that you have in guitar repertoire. For example, if you want to try Fenaroli book first, that you can just put chords on the bass, and you have also numbers. A good way to start is to look at the rule of the octave of Carulli. Also, Molino wrote the rule of the octave, Ledoux, Kaspar Merz. We have many examples of rule of the octave on the guitar with typical positions for the guitar.
Are all of them similar, or are they all a little different?
No, they are very similar with a little difference. And of course, they don't use all the tonalities. For example, G minor, that is very typical in Partimenti. It's very easy to find a G minor Partimento on the guitar. It doesn't exist.
Really? Okay.
Almost doesn't. Yeah, the bemolle is the greatest enemy of the guitarist. so when we find a G minor Partimento,
hey, right? A blues guitar. You're a blues guitarist, right? All these sharp keys: A major, E major. A horn player will just say, "You know what? I'm out of here." It's just the way it is, right?
Yeah, of course. So when I started to play Fenaroli, I transposed some of his Partimentos.
Okay, so you do transpose the Partimenti to a more guitaristic key.
Yes, because the guitar, there's such a big difference with keyboard, because on keyboard you just play horizontally, so your hands move on a horizontal line, but on the guitar you move on a horizontal but also vertical line, and then you have some jolly that are the open strings. When you realize a Partimento, you put a bass. This is a G bass. When I hold this with the hand, I cannot go anywhere with my hand, but I can just take the frets that I have near this finger. So while on the keyboard you just play a bass with a hand, and with the other hand you do whatever you want, realizing on the guitar is like to realize a Partimento on the keyboard, but with only one hand. So you really need the open strings to move your hand and do some more interesting things. And that's why I transpose Partimenti normally, because I cannot play a B major Partimento with no open strings. It's not only difficult, it just doesn't make sense.
What about the voice leading? So when we learn the rule of the octave, that kind of solves a lot of the voice leading. So for the guitar, when you're putting in the basic consonances, are you very careful to make sure, because the guitar is, it's kind of a weird instrument. So because and I'm saying that as a guitarist, there's the same note in each string. Sometimes you can find the F, right, on all six strings.
That's another problem with the guitar. You have too many notes.
Of the same note, right? So how do you prevent bad counterpoint on the guitar?
You practice a lot two voices, only two voices, because it's very difficult to control more than three voices on the guitar. So the guitar texture will be a good texture if it is three voices, but many melodies is just bass and one melody of one line. So you practice a lot two voices.
Now, what about cadences on the guitar? What are some good ways to learn cadences on guitar? And actually, you can tell, what are the good keys on the guitar?
Well, the good keys are all the keys for which we have a repertoire. So C major, D major and minor, E major and minor, G major, A major and minor, and that's it. All the others are like the 1% of the guitar practice and repertoire. And the cadenzas are really fine to do on the guitar.
Can you play some cadences for us just to see how it sounds on the guitar?
Yeah, it's or you can do. It's very easy when you have open strings to do the compound cadence. Yeah, cadences is totally fine, and there are a lot into the guitar methods. In the Carulli method, he has a lot of exercise where you have first a cadence in that tonality, and then an exercise. Also, Johann Caspar Merz did the same thing. Giuliani, no, but Giuliani is very good to study because in his Opus 1, he put a lot of exercise on intervals, on thirds, sixths, octaves, tenths. So when you have to realize a bass, you really need to have these intervals into the hand. It's also a mechanical work, so you don't really think every note you are playing. You just do because you have this into your hands. It goes, 5, 6 are just like positions on the fretboard.
When we talk about learning figured bass on the guitar, I've read that you've mentioned there's a book by Peter Croton, which I think he has a book on figured bass for the guitar.
Yes.
Could be a good primer for people. But my question about figured bass on the guitar is, now with the Baroque guitar and the lute, was that chords they were strumming, or was it actually like 3-voice textured harmonies that they were creating?
In the Baroque guitar, it's mostly strumming. You can do some counterpoint, but it's really not the main job you're doing. It's more strumming on the Baroque guitar.
Is that the same for guitar then? When we learn figured bass on the guitar, is that also strumming?
No, because on the classical guitar you actually have basses that are missed on the Baroque guitar. So the basso realization on the classical guitar is more similar to the lute. So you actually realize a bass with a voice leading.
There's some things when people learn the guitar, they learn chords, chord symbols, your C, F, G, and that kind of thing. But one thing I've noticed is when we do that, sometimes we get a lot of parallel motion in chords. So if I take an F chord shape, a bar chord, and I just move it up to G in the bar shape, that's fine in popular music, but I guess you wouldn't really do that, right, in the 18th century, that kind of movement.
On the Baroque guitar, they didn't care about the octaves, because the Baroque guitar is almost impossible to have a proper voice leading. So they don't have basses. They have double notes everywhere. So there are several articles that studied these realizations. They really, on the Baroque guitar, I say, not on the lute, but on the Baroque guitar, they didn't care so much about fifth and octaves.
So like power chords then?
Yes. There's an incredible work by Thomas Christensen that support the idea that while the music was polyphonic till, let's say, the beginning of 17th century, when they introduced the Baroque guitar and there was the guitar alphabeto, so just chords to be strummed, at that point they invented the identity of a chord. They invented the G major chord as a independent entity. Yeah, it's just a beautiful, beautiful article by Thomas Christensen, saying that because of the guitar, they invented what we know as a G major, E minor, etc.
Really?
Because there was no way to control the voice leading on the guitars.
That's like the greatest historical thing I've ever heard. Wow. So we can really, I guess you can thank or curse guitar for the chord symbol, right? I guess it kind of that's really mind-blowing. Oh my goodness.
It's an incredible story about the Baroque guitar. While on the lute is much more similar to the classical guitar, and I found very interesting there is a method by the lute player Nigel North. He wrote a beautiful book about realizing basso continuo on lute and theorbo, and he explains how, as we have the problem of voice leading, it's very important to learn some shapes that we know don't contain mistakes. So he said just when you have a 5/6 chord, you have not so much the time on an instrument like the lute, and the guitar is the same. to think about a proper voice leading, because every time is different. As I said, because we don't work only on one line, horizontal line like the keyboard, but we work on 2 lines plus the jolly of open strings. We have too many options to choose, so we cannot choose any. We just do pa pa, and we know that there are not mistakes in these shapes on the guitar.
Can I ask then culturally, because they're so obsessed about counterpoint in the 18th, 17th, 16th century, so they just, is it like today they give guitarists a lot of like leeway? Like, just do your thing, don't worry, but just play we want the guitar sound in the ensemble, and that's it.
But no, for example, Sora is exactly the example of incredible counterpoint writing and voice leading on the guitar.
Okay, talk about him.
I think that Sora cannot be compared to the other guitarists because he was a really he was trained in the monastery of Montserrat, that is out of Barcelona, and they had really a severe program about harmony and counterpoint. And Fernando Sora brought all these notions of harmony and counterpoint on the guitar. That's why his music at the level of counterpoint is much more rich and complex than any other of his colleagues.
And by any other, who do you mean?
I mean Giuliani, Carulli, Carcassi, Merz. I think there's no one other guitarist that can be compared with Sora thinking about counterpoint and harmony. He really did incredible, let's say he had incredible results in counterpoint on the guitar. That's why his music is much more complicated to study and to learn.
Very interesting. And did Sora have, obviously he has a lot of compositions. Does he have a method book that he's ever published?
Yes. It's a beautiful book, The Method of Sora, because he explains much more things than if you think the method of Giuliani is just music. There are arpeggios, intervals, some pieces about ornamentations, while the method of Sora talks about strings, where do you have to buy a guitar, how you transcribe. There are some examples. He made the transcriptions of Haydn, and he shows how to reduce music on the guitar with a proper voice leading. He talks about the colors of guitar, how to imitate other instruments. Yeah, the Method of Sora is an incredible book.
So if we go back to Partimento, now the book 1 of Fenaroli is your standard book on consonances. What about dissonances now? So if we're talking about dissonances, on the keyboard, it's quite, like you said, horizontal. Is it tricky to be able to hold notes because you have limited strings and you have to prepare dissonances? How does that work on the guitar?
So there are some dissonances that are very easygoing on the guitar, like 4-3, but also the chain of 7-6, 7-6, so etc. When we have like the 9, is not always easy to do it on the guitar. In some keys we are able to do it naturally, but in some others it's very difficult to find a fingering that can hold you the note and then resolve on the consonants.
So what about the other things in Partimento? Can we talk about bass motions now?
Yes, also the bass motions are really... there are many special cases on the guitar. Like for the rule of the octave, we often change the octave of the bass. So when we have a bass that goes up by step, often we change the octave. So it's not anymore up by step, but there are some jumps. Also, many times when we have, for example, jump down a third, up a second. So we have... This can be fine in C major, but if we change the key, we have to adjust the bass. So the intervals are not always the same. What we can do about bass motions is is just learning like a finger pattern, and it helps a lot to resolve these passages. Like I said before, if we do 5/6 in the style of Giuliani, it's very easy to do it because you just move the left hand. While if you do it with no hand shape, it's much more difficult. I would say that guitar is almost has no rules, but has a lot of special cases.
Would you be able to demonstrate a few more moti del basso? Because I think they're very beautiful when I hear them on the guitar.
Yes, I liked a lot. I think you read the book of Joe Bilzerman, Harmony, Counterpoint and Partimento, and he makes some exercises on moti del basso in the first 2 chapters, and are the same, of course, that we can find in the Partimenti. We can do, this I like is third down, step up. Or you can do. And there are several different realizations of this one.
Up a fourth, down a fifth?
Yes. Or you can do making suspension. And this is not very easy because you cannot keep all the notes. So it sounds better 1 octave down.
Why is the guitar notated in treble clef? Because, I mean, I know that even though it's notated in treble clef, the actual pitch is an octave down, right? And actually, I was so shocked to hear this, but the range of the guitar is really, it's like the E below the bass clef.
Yeah, I think because the guitar, it goes also a lot higher. So it's better to don't have too many
ledger lines.
Additional, yes.
Right. But that means like you could really, if you read it, if you played guitar in the bass clef and actually notated it in the bass clef, you could read all these partimenti, right? They would sound at the exact concert pitch.
Exactly. But normally to practice, I transpose them in treble clef. Because if I want to write down something, I want to be as fast as possible.
Okay, so what are some manuscripts or treatises that people should check out that would be relevant for partimento playing on the guitar? Oh, and you can mention like the opus number and that sort of thing. For
the guitar, I would suggest the Opus 1 by Mauro Giuliani with all the work on the intervals. That's very, very important. And his Opus 50 and 51 as studies, because they are pretty different from the other collection of studies. These are more contrapuntal. At the same time, I suggest the Lavinia manuscript because it has a lot of counterpoint examples, really similar to the one of Giuliani.
And would you say keep it to 2 voices then?
Yes, totally.
Okay.
You keep it to 2 voices, maximum 3, but only if you are going like parallel thirds, and the other voice is moving. This is easy to manage on the guitar. If you want 3 voices just moving differently, I think it's too hard. Then I would say the method of Ferdinando Carulli. He wrote a guitar method that is very useful because it goes for every key with cadences and exercises in every key.
And you've looked at those. So you just said every key. And so what about those weird keys like B? And...
No. I mean, he wrote for guitar keys.
Oh, okay. So all the guitar keys. Okay, I get it.
Exactly. And he wrote also a book of harmony for the guitar. That's very interesting, where he explains how to make an accompaniment. The guitarist always thought about accompany. So like if you want to make a basso continuo, not really Partimento. But if you want to make harmony on the guitar, Ferdinando Carulli wrote a really good book about this. And then I would suggest also by Fernando Soro, Opus 31 and 35, that are two collections of easy studies that are also almost always like in two-voice setting, and are really useful to see some examples about how to move the voices on the guitar.
Now, you're a professional classical guitarist. Is it heresy to try these things on the acoustic guitar? And you can be honest.
Actually, I never owned an acoustic guitar, and
you never played blues guitar on the acoustic.
No, only the electric guitar. Yes, with plectro.
You know, when I was taking guitar lessons, the classical guitar teachers were so strict. Your hand has to be like this. You have to hold the guitar like this.
No, I think when you learn this thing on a guitar, you learn a style. So if you're okay about playing galant style on electric guitar, it's totally okay for me. It's just a matter of style, not of instrument.
Now, talking specifically about Partimento, not basso continuo, realizing Partimento, can this be done on the fly, or is this more for coming up with a realization and then recording it, and then that's it, moving on to the next Partimento? Or can you actually improvise on the guitar in Partimento?
Not everything. I think on the guitar, it's totally fine to just do like easy things, like the first book of Fenaroli with no dissonance, just putting the rule of the octave and some cadences. This you can do. But if you want to write a proper voice leading, if you want to do a proper voice leading, it's very difficult. Also because in many partimenti, the bass, it moves really a lot. While if you look at the guitar repertoire of that time, the basses, they move much, much less. It's very difficult to make a proper voice leading when you have only one hand that have to care about all the notes, bass and trebles. So when I want to realize a partimento, let's say in a more appropriate way that sounds good on the guitar, I try many solutions at home improvising, but then I need to write down to have a real realization, a good realization.
What about free composition or free improvisation on the guitar? Because these moti del basso and the schema and all these contrapuntal ideas, this cadences, the rule of the octave, they're really beautiful things. And do you find that you can write little pieces with this a lot easier? And you see from the repertoire that how they did it, and you can come up with your own compositions as well?
I think they are, as you say, they are really useful to write down some of your pieces, like little preludes, little studs. To a free improvisation, I think is much easier to think about schemas, because when you use a schema, you have like a wider look at the phrase, at the structure of the piece. So it's easier to do something instrumental and effective more than when you realize just a moto del basso and you are really concentrated on that kind of rule. Let's say in the schema, you are more free.
If I could go back in time, because I was 9 years old when I took classical guitar lessons, and it was pretty standard. If you could be my teacher, and I would say, please teach me more in the figured bass way, teach me more in the partimento way, how would you teach a young kid?
So I would start with scales and intervals, and to play and play and play so many times that your fingers get used and know where to go at the moment on the fretboard. After that, I will do rule of the octave, and then I made like a collection of little models to exercise on counterpoint, and I think it's a good way to have, to get fluent in doing this kind of things. And while doing this thing, I think it's a good option the approach of Joe Bilzerman that put together counterpoint and partimento with schemas, because you cannot learn first all the counterpoint and then go to make a schema. You just learn these kind of things together. So I would make counterpoint and then putting into a schema and then try to ornate this kind of schema to have something more musical.
Let me ask some technical things about figured bass on the guitar. For instance, 6/4-2 chords, 6/5 chords, 6/4-3 chords. Do you find that that's easy to do on the guitar? Because, guitarists, we like to think of chord symbols, right? And it's just so straightforward. Oh, this chord, that chord. But what about reading chords on the guitar in terms of figures?
As I said before, it's very useful, the approach of Nigel North, that is the same for the lute and the guitar. For example, the 6/4-2 chord or the 3/4-6, you have a lot of music in C major on the guitar when you just play. And this is very easy to do it on the guitar, the 3/4-6 chord. But in this key, if you want to do on another key, this is much, much more difficult. Some chords are very easy in one key and very difficult in the next key. So you usually learn the good ones on the guitar.
What if I wanted to improvise, not on a partimento bass, but just on a simple, imagine it's just whole notes or half notes, and it's not so crazy, the bass line, and I need to improvise something like a partimento on top of those bass notes. Would that be something I can do on the guitar?
Yes, totally. That's something you can really do it, taking as an example the studies of these guitarists, where often, for example, there is basso albertino. And on this kind of bass that is really steady and moves every part.
That's like fantastic.
It's very easy to do, so you can do something
That's like cheating.
And then you can do... this kind of...
You're making that up, right? I mean, you're kind of making...
I just played the easiest thing that came to my mind.
That sounded incredible. And that's using models and the training that we can gather from partimento, counterpoint, figured bass, that sort of thing?
No, with this training, you can do much better things. For example, if you want to use some common schematas, you can do many pieces on the guitar starts with do, re, mi, so something like... and then you go with a prener. And then you want a cadenza. Or you want to go with a monte, so you make something... Then you can go on with a fonte, so something like... and then you go back to your do, re, mi, or you put a major or something like... Well, we hope that many guitarists will get interested into this topic and develop new guitar books and new way to teach the guitar in a more fun and interesting way.
If I have just a simple bass progression, how many ways can I color that progression? What are the different variations? So can you show me 3 different ways to do a simple progression?
Yes. If we want to do something like, let's say we want to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1. We can realize this like in the style of a prelude, so with several different formulas of arpeggio, like or you can have another kind of arpeggio. Or you want a more two-voice set, so something like. Or you want like a call and response, so something like.
Can I ask you a question about diminution then? So we talked about the bass notes and the harmony going from chord to chord. What is your recommendation for developing that vocabulary of diminution from chord to chord?
With my students, I use the very easy studies by Fernando Sor, that are studies is opus 31 and 35. These are very easy and so are very good to develop diminutions. For example, you have you can use this simple study to make some diminution, like something like this. So you add passing notes, or you can start also with
how many voices was that? Was that 3 voices?
Is two voices.
That sounded so full. I couldn't believe it.
You just make it full when you don't have to make other things with your fingers.
Guitars should just be 2 voices. So good.
When we think about guitar, we always think that guitar is an instrument that can make everything, but often it makes more with less.
Yeah.
Most of the most beautiful guitar pieces are just arpeggios. Many guitar music is just bass and one voice that moves, or one arpeggio on a steady chord. So you don't actually do so many things with 3-4 voices.
Oh my goodness, the partimento is bang, 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 is bass note, bass note, bass note.
Partimento is really challenging on the guitar because you have to make so many things.
It's boom,
sometimes
boom.
When I want
But you just playing that is such a profound thing, what you just said. And it is so clear when you play it. It sounds so beautiful. And when we slow it down and we think less is more.
And maybe I think a good realization on partimenti comes with the schema that is interesting, boring. And we know, I read on the book of Sanguinetti, that normally it's just a double counterpoint. So when you have the bass that moves, the other voices are steady. So the boring, interesting game when you have a partimento that makes... you normally realize with the upper voices that do only long notes. And then it changes. Is exactly the opposite. So you have long notes at the bass, and you go with upper voices. And if you put together, it sounds quite well on the guitar, and is not like the most difficult thing to do.
Fantastic.
This is a kind of realization that sounds good on the guitar because you do only one thing at a time, not so many.
Can I ask you, what has been the reaction to your classical guitar colleagues about you playing partimento on the guitar?
it was a good reaction. Like, oh wow, it's so cool how you do it. It's beautiful, but nobody joins the game.
Not yet, anyway.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yes.
It's coming. It's coming.
No, I hope so, because I'm starting to give some. It's a couple of years that I go to like Congress to explain what I think about guitar and Partimento, and I found some colleagues that were also working like me on these topics. So I know that we are still a few guitar players, but they will come more and more. And next year I'm gonna make a course, a masterclass in the Conservatory of Foggia about this with many guitar students. So I think year by year the thing will grow up.
Now, you said you discovered Partimento 2005, 2006. How do you feel the last 2 years? Did you notice that there was a big jump in interest?
Yes, such a big jump. And like every community that goes, that expands, of course, also many amateurs are joining. So I remember when just was opened the Facebook group, The Art of Partimento, there were only PhD students and university professors. Now there are many people that are just starting. So we are going maybe a bit less technical, but I think it's such a good thing for everybody to have a community that is growing and is developing so fast. The last 2 years were incredible, and I think it will go like this for a long time.
Now, this is not related to Europe, but I've always admired South American classical guitar. I always admired it, and I don't know if you have any experience or in that area, but they just make really good music. But do you have any experience in South American classical guitar? It sounds very beautiful.
It's incredible. I love South American guitar playing. I am totally in love with Agustin Barrios, that was from Paraguay, and they developed a different way to play the guitar, a different way to put the hands on the guitar. Like,
can you demonstrate?
Maybe because playing, yeah, sure. Maybe because coming from a less academic world, what amazed me is like the studies of Villalobos. Villalobos found a way to make the guitar sound just like a guitar when you play his music. The second prelude. Etc. as the second part that made. Etc. These are just like power chords moving on the guitar and making an effect that it can live only on the fretboard of a guitar.
For some reason, it sounds okay on the guitar, right? All the parallelism.
Yeah, it sounds okay on the guitar and totally not okay on other instruments. That's why I say that they invented a way to play the guitar just like a guitar. Because if you think on the classical period, they were always trying to play the guitar like other instruments. The method of Sor is full of, if you want to imitate the cello, do like this. If you want to imitate the flute, you should play like this. If you want to be an oboe, play like this. But he never says how to play the guitar as a guitar. And this came very, very later with South American guitarists. That's why I love them.
Now, how do you analyze guitar literature? Because now you have Partimento lens, a figured bass lens. Do you see, like for instance, can you break down all this literature quite easily now? Like, so if you take a sonatina or the pieces that you normally play, are you seeing stuff that, like, with a composer's insight?
Yes, a lot. I think the Galant schemata of Gerdingen are a great way to analyze this kind of music. I was used to analyze music like with the numerals and functions, and I remember I was always confused about many things. But when I read music in Galant style, many things just became clear about what's going on into the piece. Why this section is like this? And imagine, for example, something like quiescenza, no? When you want to analyze this with Roman numerals, it's much harder than to just look at this as a schema and as an effect, let's say, into a musical into a musical story. So when I came up with music in Galant style, the analysis of this kind of repertoire became much more clear and easy.
Do you write figures or Arabic numerals with circles to denote bass notes when you analyze guitar pieces?
No, usually I just write, I don't know, like with colors. This is a fonte, this is a major, this is a do re mi.
Nicola, did we leave anything important out with regard to the topic of Partimento and the guitar?
I think there's something important to say about this, that Partimenti were, let's say, an activity, a program that you studied when you were quite young. So like at 10 years old, 12 years old could practice Partimenti on the keyboard. Coming to the guitar, I see is much more difficult to make it study to a very young kid, 10, 12 years old. This year, I'm starting with the first experiments with really young kids. And it's very difficult because on the guitar, it's much harder, like a physics on putting all the fingers on the fretboard. And so is not only the mental work that you have to do, but also the physical work on the instrument is very hard for a little kid. So I don't know how it will go with the young kids. I know they are very creative, and it's very important to study these things before you get educated with the Roman numerals and other kind of point of views. Because when you're an adult, it's very difficult to say, okay, now I forget the last 5 years of harmony and I start from zero with Partimenti. For a kid, it's much easier to be natural in this kind of things. But on the guitar, there's a kind of physical approach that is much harder to do. So I think with time and many experiments on the students, we have to find a way to make it on young kids.
We left out Giuliani's student, Felix Horecki, who's a Polish musician. Does he have any materials that might be useful for Partimento guitarists?
Yes, I remember Horecki wrote, I think it's a method. It's full of exercises like of counterpoint in scale, and there are arpeggios and cadences. Yes, I read this material. I didn't find particularly useful the Horecki material. I prefer to just read the studies of Giuliani.
Okay. I'm so obsessed now with historically informed performance. And so for the guitar, can you help me in that regard? Who are some good performers, interpreters of 18th century music on the guitar? Are there any recordings of people you admire that maybe you can share with my audience?
Yes, I really like the recordings of Maccari and Pugliese. They have a fantastic guitar duo. They play a lot in duo, but also alone. Claudio Maccari and Paolo Pugliese, and they recorded old duos by Sor, by Giuliani. Then they made also a project about Beethoven sonatas on the guitars. They sound amazing, but especially they play mostly the original 19th century guitar, and they specialized for many years on this kind of repertoire. So I really like how they play this music. And then there is I like a lot Carlo Marchione. He plays Giuliani fantastic, and but on the classical modern guitar. And another player that I really admire, and he's studying also early music, so I think he will do even more beautiful things in the future, is Lorenzo Micheli. That is an Italian guitar player, is an incredible guitar player and also a really, really good teacher. And yeah, by Lorenzo, he recorded the Rossinianas, and he plays a lot live, this kind of repertoire. So I totally suggest to listen to him when there is the occasion to do it.
Do you want to comment on, I think Julian Bream passed away quite recently, right? And he was a very famous classical guitarist. Did you listen to his recordings much?
Yes, Julian Bream was like my hero, because he played with such a creativity, a fantasy. He was so original in playing a repertoire that many other players played, let's say, in a way much more academic, while Bream always put all his fantasy and all his feelings into music. He did an incredible work for both guitar and the lute. That's why also the lute community is crying for his departure. And he did also a lot of job with contemporary composers. So composers like William Walton, Benjamin Britten, they all wrote for guitar incredible music just because of him. And so I think, Julian Bream is really the example of every modern guitar player about having a full musical life, full of creativity and fantasy in making music.
And could you comment on flamenco players who play in a completely different style, so to speak, but it's quite interesting. They use the same kind of classical guitar. Do you have any experience with that style, flamenco?
The classical repertoire is full of flamenco-like style. Of course, it's not exactly the same, because a flamenco player studies a lot the rhythms of the classical flamenco dances, because the flamenco guitar is born to accompany dance and then singing, then much more after it became a solo instrument. And what I like in flamenco players is that they learn a lot of schemas. So I think for a flamenco player would be very easy to deep dive into this kind of word that we love about improvisation and partimenti, because it's what they do every day. They improvise on coplas. They have a lot of schemas, and they really know how to do it on the guitar. So maybe they will be the best in doing these kind of things.
My final question is about chord symbols, and that's quite different from partimento and figured bass. And it's been a pretty normal way to teach guitar for the last century, or just chord symbols. But from what you've told me, even earlier, right, a G major chord came originally, what's that, in the 17th century or something very early. Now, what's your opinion about that pedagogy-wise? Because if somebody learns to read chord symbols, there's really no thought, I think, in the voice leading of chord symbols. I mean, unless you get to a very high level. But when people are learning chords, they just go, oh, this is A minor, this is G, this is D, and so forth. They just hit the shapes, right? So now with your knowledge of partimento and counterpoint and the voice leading, does that have any effect on the way we teach chord symbols?
Yes. I'm happy you made me this question. I didn't expect, but I really want to answer this, because it's a topic that I think a lot. When it came out, the first guitar alphabeto in the 17th century, at the beginning, if you ever had the occasion to use this kind of alphabet, it's very different from the modern one that we use. Now we have A, B, C, D is A, B, C, and D. So La, Si, Do, Re, Mi, etc. While in the Baroque era, the order was really uncommon because the A was a G major, the B was a C major, the C was a D major, D is A minor. So there is not a clear order in the in all the chords in the order of the chords. And I found out the order like three years ago. I was reading a book about the art of memory. There's a terrific book by Frances Yates. She's an expert about memory in medieval times and Renaissance time. And suddenly I found on this book Alphabeto chart. Alphabeto chart was a chart of alphabeto, and every letter was meant to have the shape of an object. So, for example, you have scissors. If you have scissors, they look like an X, like the shape of the object. And at that time, I was studying Baroque guitar, and I was wondering about why A is a G major, while B is a C major, etc. I just didn't understand, didn't find a way to memorize these chord shapes. And comparing with this book about memory, I found out that in the Baroque era, they just had the letter that had the shape of your fingers on the guitar when you play a chord. So if you play a G major chord on the Baroque guitar, you just open your fingers like an A, like a letter A. And if you play B major, C major, the shapes of your fingers just look like a B. So that was super clear, and I found out that when you teach guitar and you teach chords, is a very good way to teach looking at the shapes of the fingers on the fretboard. So I think when you want to teach harmony and basso continuo or some easy realization of partimento, it's very important to have this approach that is super practical. There's nothing theory here. It's super practical on your instrument to memorize some shapes of the fingers on the guitar. And I think it's much easier and much useful than to use the modern guitar alphabeto that we all use if we want to play some songs, for friends, like Yesterday of the Beatles. When you read the modern alphabeto and it doesn't have any connection with the shape of your fingers on the instrument. Well, the Baroque alphabeto was totally this. Was just how you shape your fingers on the fretboard.
So that's amazing. In fact, that's so similar to, like, for instance, in jazz, when they are breaking down a solo by somebody like Charlie Christian, they say a lot of the notes are coming out of the shape of the chords, like Joe Pass and that sort of thing. So that's kind of mind-blowing, actually. It's another thing that is pretty crazy. So, wow.
Yes, I love this topic, and I wrote an article that was published 2 years ago at the university, because it's an incredible topic because it connects the guitar with the art of memory that is connected also to many other artists in the Renaissance time. And it was super useful for guitarists. It meant a lot for our instruments at the time. So it's very strange to have it today totally changed. Can I say something funny?
Yes, of course.
When I was searching about this, the first book ever claiming to have invented the guitar alphabeto was by Gerolamo Montesardo, was published in Rome in 1606, and is exactly the same front page of Guitar for Dummies. Is written, really, you can compare it. I'll send you the photos. Is written a super easy method that you can learn by yourself with no teacher. It was exactly the same in 1606 and now in the 21st century.
Oh my gosh.
It was just Guitar for Dummies.
That is so funny. That is the funniest thing. Isn't that so interesting that some things never really change, right?
Yes. When you want to sell a guitar book, this is way. It's just go to the amateur.
Yeah.
And I found an article that was comparing the music prints before and after that date, and the printing went like skyrocketing.
Wouldn't it be crazy if he outsold Frescobaldi, right? Wouldn't that be funny?
Well, Frescobaldi at some point, but also Monteverdi, had to write some alfabeto songs, they called, because they were selling so well that even if they didn't like the style, they had to print something just to make money.
Isn't that so funny? I mean, that some things really never change, and that's really hilarious.
Yeah, super fun.
Well, what can I say? A big thank you to Nicola Pignatiello for coming onto the show to talk about Partimento on the guitar and so many other topics. It's been definitely a much requested topic because we have so many guitarists listening, and I'm glad that I was able to have this conversation with you. Now, if people want to get in touch with you, how do they do that? And please, what do you have in store for the rest of the year?
Thank you so much. If people wants to be in contact with me, they can contact me on the Instagram page Nicola Pignatiello, or I have a Facebook page of the Duo Scarlatti, and yes, or by email or whatever. I really like to contact to get in contact with the community, because we have to do this all together. And for the rest of the year, I'm just finishing a guitar edition of the Fenaroli rules, because I think we need something where to start. And I think the rules of Fenaroli with the moti del basso and all the examples took from the manuscripts can be very well translated. I transcribed it for guitar, I changed some keys, but can be a first textbook to start realizing at first, at least the first books of Fenaroli, and to start with something, because we really lack of material. Then we are all in stop with concerts, so we are making mostly recordings. So we are studying with Duo Scarlatti some new pieces for two guitar. I'm making recordings for Tiorbo with a singer, with music of Caccini and Monteverdi. And with the Mishmash, we have a group of world music. We are preparing a special program about Bela Bartok and his field recordings in the countryside of Hungary and Turkey. So these are the projects for the rest of the year.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Nicola, for being on the Nikhil Hogan Show. I really hope to be able to talk to you again soon. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Nikhil.